You have a job, you pay your bills on time, you're not behind on anything. From the outside, your finances look completely fine, maybe even solid. But here's what nobody is saying out loud. Most people in their 30s are one unexpected bill away from a financial crisis. One job loss, one car repair, one medical situation, one thing they didn't see coming, and the whole structure starts to crack. Not because they're irresponsible, not because they're bad with money, but because the financial system most people in their 30s are living inside of has almost no room for error. And what makes this so dangerous is that it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels normal. It feels like adulting. It looks from every angle like progress. That's exactly why it's a trap. Today, we're going to break down why so many people in their 30s, people who are genuinely doing the right things on the surface, are still living on a financial wire. What's causing it, what it actually looks like in real numbers, and what you can do right now to change the structure before life forces you to. Let's get into it. Section 1, the illusion of stability. Here's the thing about your 30s, they feel like arrival. You've got more income than you had at 22. You might have a mortgage, a car payment, maybe a family. You've got a career now, not just a job. You've got things, visible things, real, tangible things that signal you're building something. And that feeling of arrival is exactly what makes this decade financially dangerous. Because arrival feels like safety, it feels like the hard part is over. Yeah, like the foundation is finally set. Like you can stop white knuckling it and actually breathe for a while. But what most people don't realize is that they've traded one kind of financial pressure for another. And the new version is quieter, more invisible, and in some ways more dangerous than the first. In your 20s, the pressure was not having enough. You were financially stretched because you didn't earn much yet. That pressure was clear. You could see it. You felt it every time you checked your bank account. In your 30s, the pressure is different. You're earning more, yes, but you're also spending more commitments, more fixed costs, more obligations that show up every single month, whether the rest of life is cooperating or not. And the gap between what's coming in and what's already spoken for is much smaller than it looks from the outside. When researchers look at American household finances in 2026, the numbers tell a very specific story. The median savings rate for households between the ages of 30 and 44 is hovering around 5 to 7% of income. That means for every dollar earned, most people in this age bracket are keeping fewer than 7 cents after everything else is accounted for. That's not a cushion, that's a wire, and millions of people are walking across it every single month without fully realizing how thin it is. Section 2, how the trap gets built. So, how does this actually happen? How does someone go from I finally make real money to I have almost nothing saved? It doesn't happen in one dramatic decision. It doesn't come from a single moment of irresponsibility. It happens slowly. It happens through a series of completely reasonable choices, each one logical on its own, that collectively add up to a financial structure with no margin in it. Let's walk through it. You get a raise or a new job. Income goes up. Almost immediately, lifestyle adjusts to match it. Maybe a better apartment, a newer car, more restaurants because you're working hard and you've earned it, more convenience, more comfort. This is lifestyle inflation, and it's almost entirely invisible while it's happening because every individual upgrade feels justified. Then the big commitments start stacking. A mortgage, which in 2026, with interest rates still sitting between 6 and 7.5% on a 30-year loan, means a significantly larger monthly payment than it did 5 years ago for the exact same house. Car payments, and maybe childcare, which in most major American cities now runs anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000 per month per child. That's a number that genuinely shocks people until they're in it. Then there's the debt that followed you from the previous decade: student loans, credit card balances that never quite got to zero, personal loans. According to data from the Federal Reserve, adults between 30 and 44 carry some of the highest average debt loads of any age group in the country. When you include mortgage debt, auto loans, student loans, and revolving credit, the numbers run well into six figures for the median household in this bracket. You're not broke, but you're committed. And committed is not the same thing as stable. Every dollar that goes to a fixed commitment is a dollar that cannot go anywhere else. It can't become savings. It can't become an emergency fund. It can't become an investment. It doesn't compound. It doesn't grow. It just disappears into obligations every single month on schedule, regardless of whether life is smooth or whether everything is falling apart at once. And life does not always cooperate. Section 3, what an emergency actually costs. Let's talk specifically about what we mean when we say emergency. Most people imagine financial emergencies as catastrophic events: a job loss, a major hospitalization, a natural disaster, the kind of thing that makes headlines and that most people assume won't happen to them. But financial emergencies are usually much smaller than that, and that's actually what makes them so destabilizing. You weren't bracing for them, you didn't see them marked on the calendar. They arrived without warning and demanded money you didn't have set aside. The average car repair in the United States in 2026 runs between $1,500 and $4,500, depending on what's wrong. A single HVAC system failure in a home can cost $3,000 to $8,000 to fix or replace. An emergency room visit, even with decent employer sponsored insurance, can still leave you with a bill between $1,200 and $2,500 after you cover your deductible. A root canal, a broken phone that needs immediate replacement, a water heater that gives out on a Wednesday morning, a busted tire on a vehicle that's your only way to get to work. None of these things are catastrophes by anyone's definition. They're just life. They're the normal, predictable unpredictability of being a functioning adult. But here's what happens when a $2,200 emergency lands on someone who has $350 in savings and $3,900 in their checking account that's already allocated to the next 30 days of bills. They have three options. They put it on a credit card, which in 2026 carries an average interest rate of 22 to 27%, depending on the card and the balance. They borrow from family or a friend, or they delay something else, a bill, a debt payment, a necessity, and set off a chain reaction through their finances that takes months to unwind. And then the following month is harder, because now they're playing catch up while everything else that was already due didn't pause to wait for them. This is how people who earn $75,000 or $90,000 a year end up feeling like they're drowning. It's not a character flaw, it's math, it's a margin problem. And margin doesn't appear on its own. It has to be built intentionally because life will not build it for you. See section 4, the psychology behind it. Now let's go deeper because the numbers tell only part of the story. There's a psychological reason why people in their 30s are especially vulnerable to this particular kind of financial fragility, and it goes beyond spending habits or income. It's about identity, and identity is one of the most underestimated forces in personal finance. In your 30s, there is enormous social and cultural pressure to appear to have figured it out, to have the house, the car, the vacations, the dinners, the wardrobe that signals you've arrived at a level of success appropriate for your age and stage. Your peer group is doing it, your social feed is full of it, your work colleagues are doing it. And if you're the one not keeping up, you feel the gap in ways that are hard to ignore. This is called social comparison, and it is one of the most powerful financial forces that almost nobody names directly when they talk about money. Research in behavioral economics consistently shows that people make spending decisions based on their perceived peer group, not their actual financial capacity. What your colleague seems to be earning, what your friends appear to be spending, what the neighbors just bought, what someone you went to high school with posted last weekend. These external signals shape financial behavior at a level that most people would find uncomfortable to admit. And in your 30s, the peer group benchmarks get expensive fast. But here's what makes this even more psychologically complex. The people you're measuring yourself against are also stretched. The house that signals financial confidence might have a mortgage consuming 45% of the owner's take-home pay. The car in the driveway has 68 months of payments remaining. The vacation photos were partially charged to a card that's still being paid off 3 months later. The wardrobe was financed through buy now, pay later services that are quietly pulling from next month's income. The appearance of financial stability and actual financial stability are two completely different things. And from the outside, you genuinely cannot tell them apart. So people keep building lives that look right, without ever building the financial structure underneath that actually works. Section 5, the emergency fund problem. Let's talk specifically about emergency funds, because this is the single most immediate and direct form of financial protection, and it's the piece that most people in their 30s either don't have at all or have badly wrong. The standard advice says 3 to 6 months of expenses. You've heard that. Almost everyone has heard that. But what does it actually mean in $2,026 for someone living a normal 30s life? If your total monthly expenses, mortgage or rent, utilities, insurance premiums, food, transportation, childcare, minimum debt payments, total $5,000 per month, then a 3-month emergency fund is $15,000. A 6-month fund is $30,000. According to Bankrate's Emergency Savings Survey, fewer than 45% of Americans in 2025 could cover a $1,000 emergency from savings alone without going into some form of debt. Among households with children, which describes a significant portion of the 30 to 44 demographic, That number is even lower. Most people don't have 3 months saved. They don't have 1 month. They have a few weeks of expenses sitting somewhere, if that. And the common reason is not that people don't understand why an emergency fund matters. They do. Everyone does. The reason is that building one requires taking money that is currently going somewhere else and redirecting it toward a goal that feels abstract and distant. It requires choosing the future over the present, consistently over a long enough period to actually accumulate something meaningful. And that choice is psychologically harder than it sounds, especially when you're already living close to the edge and every dollar feels like it already has a job. There's a concept in behavioral psychology called present bias. It's a deeply human tendency to weight immediate certainty and comfort more heavily than future protection. Your brain gives significantly more value to what's real and tangible right now than to what might happen at some unspecified point later. Paying a bill that's due today feels urgent. Funding a savings account for an emergency that might never materialize feels optional until the emergency arrives. And then it feels like the most obvious thing you should have been doing all along. Section 6, the income trap. Here's a piece of this that doesn't get discussed nearly enough. Income growth in your 30s can actually make this problem worse, not better, if you don't consciously manage what happens when the income increases. This sounds backwards. More money should mean more security, more breathing room, more cushion. But here's what actually happens for most people when their income rises. The spending adjusts almost immediately to match it. Then taxes take their share of anything that doesn't move into pre-tax accounts, and the lifestyle has now been recalibrated to the new higher level, which means it costs more every month just to sustain the baseline. The person earning $95,000 is often just as financially fragile as they were when they earned $60,000 because the expenses moved up in lockstep with the income. The margin didn't expand. It just shifted to a more expensive level of the same thinness. This is called the hedonic treadmill in behavioral economics. The basic idea is that as your standard of living rises, your emotional satisfaction with it returns to the same baseline, and then you need more to feel the same level of okay. The upgrade that felt significant 6 months ago is now just the new normal. The car that felt luxurious is now just the car. The apartment that felt spacious is now just where you live, and so the income keeps having to grow just to maintain the same feeling, while savings, margin, and financial security stay exactly where they were. The antidote is not earning less, it's building an intentional pause between earning more and spending more, a deliberate gap, a 90-day waiting period before lifestyle upgrades follow an income increase, a rule that says the money has to sit somewhere for a defined period before it gets assigned to a new commitment. That gap is where wealth gets built. Not from high income, from the gap between income and the spending decisions that chase it. Most people never create that gap. The income lands and the spending finds it almost immediately. Section 7, what actually changes it? So what do you actually do about this? Let's be specific, because motivation alone doesn't fix a structural problem. The people living on a financial wire are not lazy. They're not careless. Many of them are working extremely hard, building careers, raising families, keeping everything running. They built the life that everyone told them to build. The fragility isn't a character issue. It's a structural one, and structural problems require structural solutions. The first shift, build the floor before anything else. The emergency fund is not a reward you get to after everything else is handled. It cannot be the last item on the list, because if it is, the list never ends and the fund never gets funded. The emergency fund has to come first, or it becomes permanently theoretical. The fastest and most reliable way to build it is automation. Set up a fixed automatic transfer to a separate savings account, not the same account you pay bills from, a different one, to happen the same day your paycheck deposits, before you see the money, before you have the chance to spend it on something else, before your brain registers it as available. Start with an amount that doesn't create immediate pain. $100 per paycheck, $200. Whatever doesn't break the budget. The goal right now is to establish the habit and start the account. Once those two things exist, increase the transfer amount every 90 days. Your target is 3 months of real expenses, not estimated expenses, actual expenses pulled from the last 3 months of bank statements. Most people underestimate this number significantly. The second shift, intercept income increases before lifestyle claims them. Every time your income goes up, a raise, a bonus, a tax refund, an additional income stream, make a rule in advance. A minimum of 50% of every increase gets captured before lifestyle adjusts to it. Automate it immediately on the day the increase takes effect, before spending has time to expand. The other 50% can go to the upgraded life. That's fair, you worked for it. but the savings portion moves first automatically without requiring willpower or discipline in the moment. This is one of the most powerful habits you can build in your 30s specifically, because income in this decade tends to be on an upward trajectory. If you consistently intercept even half of that growth, you accumulate real financial protection in a way that feels almost painless because you're only capturing what's new, not cutting what already exists. The third shift: audit fixed costs once a year without mercy. Fixed costs feel permanent. That's the psychological problem with them. Your mortgage, your car payment, your insurance, your subscriptions, your recurring services, they sit in your budget month after month, and most people never revisit them because they feel like immovable objects. But some of them can be moved. Insurance premiums can be shopped and renegotiated. Subscription services accumulate silently, and many of them are being paid for things you either forgot about or stopped using. Interest rates on existing debt can sometimes be reduced through refinancing or consolidation. There's almost always somewhere in the fixed cost column where a few $100s per month can be recovered, if you're willing to look. Most people don't look. Not because they don't care, because looking requires confronting a picture that's uncomfortable to see clearly. And that discomfort is precisely what keeps the wire thin and the cushion non existent. Here's the truth that brings all of this together: the financial fragility that defines most people's 30s is not a personal failure. It is a predictable, systemic outcome of following a blueprint that was designed without enough margin in it. Get the education, get the job, build the lifestyle, keep the commitments. That blueprint is real and it produces real things. But it doesn't automatically produce financial security. It produces the appearance of it, while quietly leaving most people one $2,000 surprise away from a serious problem. The wire is real. Most people are on it. And the fact that everyone around you seems to be handling it fine doesn't mean they are. It means you can't see what's actually happening inside their finances any more than they can see inside yours. But you can change your structure, not all at once, not dramatically, not by flipping some switch that makes the whole thing different overnight. One automated transfer, one intercepted raise, one annual audit of what your fixed costs are actually doing, one decision to prioritize the floor before the upgrade. That's not a sacrifice. That's the difference between being permanently one emergency away from crisis and being someone who built a life that can actually absorb what's coming. You can build that, starting now, before the thing you didn't plan for shows up and forces your hand.